Rabbi Phil Cohen. In June of 2025, I traveled to Israel, hoping to meet with rabbis and talk with them about their lives in the rabbinate, mainly in Israel. It goes without saying that I've been deeply interested in Israel for as long as I can remember. Its people, its arguments, its constantly shifting present. But this time, I wanted to listen in a somewhat different way. I wanted to hear the stories of Israeli rabbis, why they chose this calling, what sustains them, what they have learned, and what they hope for specifically in the Israeli context. And I was very lucky. I met with men and women from different denominations, different stages of life, different corners of the country. My plan was to visit them in their homes, to sit across from them and talk face to face. Unfortunately, the week I arrived, Israel entered a 12-day clash with Iran. I ended up conducting all of my interviews from my Airbnb on Zoom. Incoming missiles interrupted one interview as my subject and I both fled to shelter. Even on Zoom, however, the conversations, all of them, were rich, revealing, and deeply human. Something unexpected came out of that experience. Originally, I had planned to speak with rabbis all around the world for this podcast. Maybe I still will going forward. But for now, I'm staying with Israeli rabbis. Their stories and Israel's stories are bound up together in very interesting and creative ways, and I find that connection endlessly fascinating. That, then, is what this podcast is about. The lives, the questions, the faith of those who serve the Jewish people, and the God with whom we live in covenant across our shared history. I am Rabbi Phil Cohen, and I am a small part of that story. Ada Zavidov is the rabbi of Kehilat Har-El in Jerusalem. Har-El was founded in 1958 and is the first Reform synagogue in Israel. Rabbi Zavidov received her smicha, her rabbinic ordination, at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in Jerusalem. In addition, she holds an MA in Jewish philosophy from the Hebrew University. Rabbi Zavidov has served as the president of Maram, the Council of Israeli Progressive Rabbis. I found our conversation to be utterly fascinating. So, sitting to my left on the Zoom screen is Rabbi Ada Zavidov, who is the rabbi of Kehilat Har-El in Jerusalem. I have a lot of things I'd like to talk with her about. Her life as a rabbi, her life as an Israeli, and her life as the rabbi of a historic synagogue in Jerusalem, the first Reform synagogue, of which she's the first woman rabbi. So thank you for agreeing to talk to me. Let's start with why you decided to become a rabbi. And you're relatively new at it. You said you graduated from the rabbinical program at Hebrew Union College just in 1999. So what brought you to that decision?
Okay, thank you, Phil. I was a believer all my life. It's very simple. Even though I grew up in a secular surrounding family education system in Tel Aviv, but I knew that God, for me, at least exists, the God of Israel, the God of our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Only later, I understood that via a feminist point of view, God is also, of course, the God of our mothers, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And I think belief brought me first to look for a synagogue. And it was already after I graduated the army, after I graduated my first degree from the Hebrew University here in Jerusalem in philosophy, general philosophy, and general literature. And something was missing in my life. What is my vocation, actually? What God wants me to do here? Finally, after many, many years of private prayers to God, somebody suggested me, why don't you go and find yourself a synagogue in Jerusalem? And back then it was 1990. Okay, the year that we have the first Gulf War. 1990. One thing I knew, that it won't be an Orthodox synagogue, because no one will put me in Ezrat Nashim behind the mechitza. No way. So people told me, you know what, go to the reform. And who knew anything about the reform more than 30 years ago? All I knew about the reform movement is that they are sitting together, men and women, without separation. And I said, it's good enough for me to to check. And this is how I came to Kehilat Har-El, that is located in the center of Jerusalem. The rabbi was a Rabbi Tovia Ben Chorin. May his memory be for a blessing. And it was exactly Rosh Hashanah, 1990. And he was standing, Rabbi Tovia, and beside him a cantor woman. And her voice was like the angel, an angelic voice. And everything was so beautiful. I opened the prayer book, and my feeling was really wow, a big wow. Avotenu and Imotenu. And one of the things I like the most is that we add Oseh Shalom Bimromav, we Aseh Shalom Aleinu Val Kol Israel, and we add Val Kol Bnei Adam. So this universal approach, the feministic approach and the universal approach, plus the feminist approach, Avotenu and Imotenu. So I immediately felt this is my place. I found at last a synagogue that I can feel connected to. Ideology and the atmosphere. One more thing I liked is that I don't have to levater.
Give up, surrender.
To surrender my Israeli Zionist identity, because the Israeli Reform Movement and, of course, Kehilat Har-El, Congregation Har-El, is very Zionist, very Israeli, and very Jewish at the same time. So my Israeli Jewish identity can live very peacefully inside myself. And I became an active member of the congregation, step by step, obviously, not immediately, but step by step in a journey. And I learned about the Reform movement, its establishment, history, values, everything that I could learn and read, I did. And everything I learned was, wow, this is exactly for me. This is the movement that I can feel inside. And after 3 years of involvement at Har-El, I became a member of the ritual committee. I became a member of the board committee, etc., etc. One person that knew me for many years said, why won't you appeal to the rabbinic school, HUC in Jerusalem? I said, oh, that can be something. That's how everything began. And HUC accepted me. Be'ezrat Hashem, Baruch Hashem. And I became a student at 1993 at HUC Jerusalem. One of the few Israeli women, Michigane enough to learn to become rabbi back then in Israel. The title Rabbah was not exist back then. So we said, the few women that we said, okay, we are not rabbinate. Chas v'chalila, rabbinate is the woman of the rabbi.
Wife of the rabbi, yeah.
But we are students, and we will be rabbi because of our talents and long studies, etc. And this is our vocation. So we are Harav. Like there is Harav Yaakov, there is Harav Maya Leibovich, Harav Naama Kelman, Harav Kineret Shirion. So you can see that the first generation of the rabbis, the women rabbis in Israel, and the second generation, I am the second generation with Rabbi Miri Gold from Kibbutz Gezer. All of us, we are Harav. Only later, the Hebrew academic for the language suggested the word Rabbah for a woman rabbi. So you can find now women, many women, maybe the majority of women that having or that are ordained to become rabbi are haraba.
I met yesterday with Sigalit Or, and that's the title she uses, Rabbah. So, and actually, it's the first time I heard it, but now I understand it's understood to be the equivalent. It's not, there's no hierarchy. It's rabbi for a man, rabbah for a woman, but it's the same title.
Right. So now it's, I think HUC does a beautiful thing here in Israel, at least. He suggests every woman before becoming a rabbi to choose. Would you like to be called Rabbah or Harav? And according to that, the certificate and the smicha will be. So I became a student at 1993, and in 1999, I was ordained to become a rabbi. And last November 2024, I had the privilege to receive the DD, the Doctor of Divinity from HUC after 25 years of being a rabbi.
1999, you graduated. And where was your first position?
My first position began actually a year before the ordination at Kehilat Tzur Hadassah, which is a suburb near Jerusalem. Actually, I was the first rabbi there. It was the youngest congregation then in the Reform movement. It was really an experience to establish the new Reform congregation in Israel. And to begin everything from the start, from fresh, with a group of volunteers that wanted a liberal Judaism in their home, Tzur Hadassah. Since then, the congregation exists.
Tell the story a little bit. What was it like? What were the things you had to do to start a new congregation? How did your congregants help you? How did Maram help? What were the tasks that you needed to fulfill to begin this new congregation?
Well, to begin a new congregation in Israel, and I stress in Israel because I don't know how is it somewhere else. I can only testify for Israel. It is a great challenge, obviously, because you have to deal with inner challenges and challenges outside with the those who run the Tzur Hadassah. We needed to have a place to daven, to pray, a permanent place. We didn't have, so it's a constant challenge to have a place to pray in, and of course to gather the people that will come to the services, to this to the bar mitzvah services, and it's really to start a new, unlike later when I became the rabbi of Har-El with all the tradition and all the establishment, the solid establishment that Har-El was as the oldest congregation. So it was a complete different experience to me. I was in Tzur Hadassah for 4.5 years. And I was privileged to come to the 20-year celebration of Tzur Hadassah, when the congregation became 20 years. And it was quite a thing to see a congregation that is solid in Tzur Hadassah. And there were times in the beginning that it was not even sure that it would survive all the challenges. Of course, the Israeli movement helped, but you have to break rock in order to say here in a secular settlement or town, you want to establish a new Reform synagogue. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, but you did it, and it celebrated 20 years. That's wonderful.
Right, but I couldn't do it, of course. It's not my deed only, obviously. It's the volunteers that were the members of Tzur Hadassah, first of all, and then the movement, of course, the Israeli movement.
How does it work In American synagogues, people join them, and you know how many members you have. Does it work the same way in Israel? I'm not sure I've ever explored that before. In other words, when you left Tzur Hadassah, it was growing, and now it's celebrated 20 years. What is this membership like in terms of numbers?
What are the numbers? Well, I cannot say about the numbers in Tzur Hadassah, but I can tell you that the numbers in general in Israel are completely different than the number you are used to in the States. I mean, for us, the biggest congregation maybe are the tiniest congregation in the States. The numbers are completely different. I began to learn that all Israel, the size of all Israel is like New Jersey. So think about how many Reform Jews are actually in Israel. Maybe there are like 2 big synagogues in the States, all the Reform Israelis. So you cannot compare between a giant and the...
I know that. I mean, my Kehilah now is probably also large by Israeli standards, but not by the bigger congregations in America. We have 200 families. Where I'm going to next month, it has also about 200 families, but everybody there are zakenim, so there are no children, just husbands and wives, or husbands or wives. So you moved from there to Har-El. That was, you said,
Yeah, well, I was there and I was in Tzur Hadassah. I learned a lot about being a rabbi, a congregational rabbi, because that was my wish to be all the time, to be a congregational rabbi and not something else. For several years, I was a teacher. I taught in the Hebrew Union College, being in charge of the Avodah Ma'asit.
Practical rabbinics.
Right. For example. And then at 2004, I was called to be a nominee in Har-El. With me were 2 male rabbis that we wanted also to become the rabbi of Har-El. I was very privileged to be elected by the congregation to become their first senior woman rabbi. Actually, at the end of the 80s, last century, Rabbi Karen Kedar was assistant woman rabbi of Rabbi Tovia Ben Chorin. So to be accurate, I'm not the first woman rabbi, but I'm definitely the first senior rabbi.
And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe that's what it says on the website. The first woman senior rabbi. Okay, so I stand corrected.
But mind you that it was for many congregants like the first woman rabbi ever, because for many of them it was difficult to accept me as a woman rabbi. Think about the year 2004, more than 20 years ago. Now, the leaders of most of the congregation in Israel are women. Back then, it was very rare that a woman rabbi will be the leader of the congregation. So that was a great challenge. But Baruch Hashem, I survived that as well. Yeah.
Well, quite obviously. Tell me a little about Har-El. When did it begin? You said something about its traditions. It's been around for a very long time. But we just start with a little bit of the historical background for the Kehilah.
Sure. So Har-El, that is located in 16 Shmuel Nagid Street in the heart of Jerusalem, or center of Jerusalem, was founded actually in 1958 by pioneers from all over, native Israelis and Olim, new and veteran Olim from all over. But the hardcore of Har-El was people from Germany and Holocaust survivors. And they wanted to establish a new Jewish liberal life in Israel, in Jerusalem, to be correct. At 1958, they established the congregation, and they were so creative and liberal and feminist obviously women and men sat together. They invited the girls to become bat mitzvah from the beginning. And at 1962, they moved to our building until now, which is a very old and beautiful, modest building with a style of old Jerusalem and with a beautiful garden. And since then, this is our home, okay? And they participate into the World Union for Progressive Judaism and became actually the first Reform congregation in Israel. We had several, again, to be accurate, Leo Beck in Haifa was the first Reform gathering in even before Har-El. But talking about a congregation, so Har-El is the oldest. We call it Em HaKehilot, the mother of all the Reform in Israel.
So Leo Beck, correct me if I'm wrong, is a school in Haifa, but it was founded under Reform auspices, and it's still a very strong. Is it a 12-year school or a high school? I don't remember anymore.
I think high school.
Yeah, it's a very strong high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so right, Leo Beck preceded you as a Reform institution, but you're Em HaKehilot. You're Em HaKehilot.
And the pioneers were Professor Shalom Ben Chorin and Avital Ben Chorin. May the memory be a blessing. And Professor Shalom Ben Chorin is the father of Rabbi Tovia Ben Chorin. And Rabbi Tovia Ben Chorin is the father of Rabbi Golan Ben Chorin. Uh-huh. So you can see here 3 generations of rabbis. So it's not true that the Reform has no continuity. You can see here an example of Reform family of 3 generations, and of course there are more examples to this phenomena. For example, they were so sure that the services are beautiful and suitable to all Israelis who are not Orthodox and not secular. So they said to themselves, that was their vision, their dream. We call upon to all the Israelis who are not Orthodox and not secular, come to us. You will find here the perfect way in between of living a Jewish, Israeli, liberal life. That was the vision. And the door was open to everybody. And it was very important to them until nowadays, the Hadrat Kodesh, that the services will be beautiful and creative and, traditional and creative at the same time. So we can say that until today, the synagogue is the heart of the congregation. Also, they had a vision to have interfaith connections, mainly with Christians. So, of course, because of the war from October 7, it's much less. But all the years we have visitors and groups all over, Jews and non-Jews, that come to Har-El. And it was very important to the pioneers. And the congregation would like to participate that way. Also with Muslims, but obviously it's much too difficult.
It's difficult now, yeah.
Sure.
So the tefillot, okay, they're the heart of what you do, interfaith dialogue. What other kinds of activities? And here you can actually educate me, and by extension the people who are listening. The most active synagogues in America have a vast number of things that they do. But you walk outside the door of the synagogue, it's not a Jewish country. So what are some of the things that other activities besides tefillot that Har-El does? What do you do as part within the synagogue and then outside as the rabbi in the Jerusalem community?
Yeah. So we have activity that we call מעורבות חברתית, being involved in the society. We don't want to stay only inside ourselves, but we want to help the surrounding. So we have connection with neighbors who are not at all Reform. Some of them, are people with special needs. And we have connections with them in order to help them, for example, with Kimcha de Pischa on Pesach and Mishlochei Manot on Purim. And we are doing 3 activities a year in order that they have an hour of fun, of songs and stories, and they know who we are, and still they like the activities. So we know that it's not outreach program. They will not become members of Har-El, but it's our involvement in the society in Jerusalem. Also, before the war, Rabbi Cohen, my colleague in Har-El, and we led many services, bar and bat mitzvah services near the egalitarian wall for families from abroad, many of them from North America. So we saw in this activity a wonderful way to have the bridge between us and our brothers and sisters in the States, for example, by welcoming them to Israel and leading the services. We had something like 50 services a year. And then from October 7, you can understand that's it. But we hope, of course, that it will renew again after the war, speedily in our time.
The war. Well, now, of course, we're dealing with Iran. But yes, someday this will all end, and the tourists will start coming back.
We like to study, so I study since the Corona via the Zoom every week. A weekly study to my congregants. Now we concluded yesterday our year now, and we will renew it after the Chagim. So we concluded the book of Shmuel Aleph, and hopefully next year Shmuel Bet, and we are going chapter by chapter every week. Also, we have a Beit Midrash in English of one of our members, Harav Helen Bar Yaakov, who is leading this Beit Midrash in English for people that prefer to learn in English. So we have this activity as well.
That's great. Maybe we can pivot and talk about Reform in Jerusalem, Reform in Israel, the Reform Rabbinical Organization, Maran. I'm very interested in the Israel Religious Action Center, for instance, and maybe something about how Hebrew Union College itself, as it's grown, as it's developed this Israeli rabbinic program, also serves the community. But yourself, your life outside, your rabbinic life outside of the congregation, what can you tell me about that?
I can tell you about that I'm very active outside the Kehilah. You may call me an activist. Since the government with Netanyahu started its revolution to change actually Israel from being a democratic state to something else. So since then, before October 7, I was a lot in the streets protesting against the government and for the Democrats, or for Israel democratic and free, etc. And since October 7, after a break that we all took after the first shock, I, with of course all the others, came back to the streets now to protest to liberate speedily, immediately, our hostages and to stop the war in Gaza in order to bring them back. And this is so crucial to do. And unfortunately, now with the war against Iran, even though I would say it's a just war, and we didn't have any other possibility but to protect ourselves, we should not forget for even a second our brothers in Gaza, which is crucial to return them. And this is very important to me. You can see that. The symbol of the liberation on my shirt, always. And this is my hope that they will be brought home. Those who are still, live, and those who are dead to have a burial here in the land of Israel.
Yeah, right now, I don't, the funny thing is, because of what's going on between Israel and Iran, Gaza, the war in Gaza you don't read about it. It's not in the papers right now. You don't know what's going on there. The situation of the hostages resonates very powerfully in the United States. We talk about it all the time. I want to ask kind of like the big picture question, which I seem to be asking everybody I'm interviewing. As a member of the Reform Kehilat in Israel, where do you see, reform going, liberal Judaism going? Is the role growing in Israel between the Masorti and the Reform community? There's a fight on. There's a fight on to, as you say, maintain a kind of a liberal Judaism expressed in Reform and Masorti. What do you see happening outside the doors of Har-El in that regard?
First of all, who knows about the future, right? I cannot predict, but I can say that the reform movement now is much different than the small reform movement that I knew when I became a student rabbi. And nobody knew what, when people ask me, what are you going to be? What are you studying for? I said, I'm going to be a teacher. But if I would say I'm going to become a rabbi, what? You're going to be what? Now in Israel, most of the people knows that there are women that are rabbis. So in this regard, the reform movement has huge achievements here in Israel. We had back then, in the 90s of last century, something like 20 congregations. Now we have something like 50 congregations from the north to the south. So it's a huge success. People know about the reform movement. It was hardly known in Israel. And we have a Knesset member, Rabbi Gilad Kariv.
His name keeps coming up in these interviews. He's a very, very charismatic, smart, powerful, interesting guy.
Absolutely. And we can say more things about him, but he's, in a way, represent the reform movement and the values of our movement in the Knesset. And he should be so brave in order to take all the insults that he gets from many Knesset members, not only the Haredim and the Orthodox, who say, here comes the reform, like that. So it's not easy. It's not easy to see that. But Gilad is strong. So what can I tell you? We don't know. Can we know what will happen with the state of Israel? All I can say is that I never lose hope. I think our national anthem says it's all, Hatikva. I think Am Yisrael Chai. I think there is lots of anti-Semitism all around the world. And I think many people, not Jews, think that Israel is to be blamed about everything. And so we have to be very strong in our self-conviction that we do have the right to be here in the state of Israel. This is our land. We have all the rights to protect ourselves. So I'm not saying we are not okay like that, as we say in Yom Kippur, Hashamnu Bagadnu. Not at all.
Of course not, yeah. I mean, anti-Semitism is a way of looking at Jews through a very distorted lens. Jews are Jews like people are people, but I've been very, very shocked myself by the rise of anti-Semitism and the growth of the application of all kinds of stereotypes. The old stereotypes, they just don't die. They take different forms.
Exactly.
And Israel gets a lot of that. So when we were talking before we started recording, I asked you to verify what I'd heard, that Martin Buber, he might not have been a member of the Kehilah, but he would come and daven. I don't know if Martin Buber ever really davened. It doesn't sound from his philosophy. I don't know that he was a davener, but he had a relationship to Har-El. Can you say what you know about that relationship?
Yeah. I can say that from what I know, because I was not there.
Sure, of course.
That time. We are talking about the beginning of Har-El. So we are talking about the 60s, last centuries, okay? Because as I said, Har-El was founded in 1958. So it was a very intellectual group of people from the Hebrew University and all around. It's not just like Buber that came to Har-El, but many other intellectuals that found it, they found their friends all over. I can tell you about a very meaningful other visit that we had in Har-El, a very, I can say, even historic visit. At 1962 or 1963, Otto Frank, father of Anna, came to Har-El. People do not know, but he was a liberal reform leader in Germany before the war. Then he came with his family to Holland. As we know, of course, he was the only survivor. And he came to Har-El back then to visit in Jerusalem. And Har-El was the only Reform liberal synagogue. And he came and he donated to Har-El something very, very unique, plate stacks, tas in Hebrew, and a crown for the Torah scroll, okay? And on the tas, let's find the word in English. So
I don't recognize the word. I'm sorry. Can you describe it?
Breastplate.
The breastplate. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Breastplate and crown made of silver. And on the breastplate, it's written Lezecher Anna Frank, memory of Anna Frank. So this is a contribution of Otto Frank to Har-El. So imagine bar and bat mitzvah, girls and boys, take the Torah scroll with this, and maybe they have the grandfathers or great-grandfathers, Holocaust survivors. So it's very meaningful. So this is one example of people that came to Har-El at those years.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Good. So, as I said before we started recording, I'm very sorry we couldn't do this in person, but I do come to Israel every year. And when I'm in Israel next time, I always go to Jerusalem and do the best I can so we can have a coffee together. Maybe if we're in Jerusalem and not Tel Aviv for Shabbat, we'll come to Har-El for the tefillot. But I'll say this on the recording. You were worried about your speech, but you were wonderful. This was a wonderful conversation. And I'm really glad that you gave me the time. And I learned a great deal. I learned a great deal from you. And b'haslacha in the future. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil, and take care in Israel.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and I invite you to stay tuned for future episodes as with the help of my guests, I continue to unpack the diverse lives that rabbis lead. Special thanks to Steve Lubetkin of Lubetkin Communications for engineering this episode. You can reach me, Rabbi Phil Cohen, at rabbipodcast@gmail.com. Easy enough to remember. Rabbipodcast, one word, @gmail.com. See you next time, and thanks a lot.